but you got dreams, a fire, a plan. It's time to lead, time to stand. Stand tall, no chains can hold you. Your heart's alive, the truth will show through. No turning back, it's your hour. This is your time to take back your power. Step into your power, don't look away. This is your rise, your brand new day. You're unstoppable, unshakable. Nothing can break your soul today. Step into your power, let the world see the strongest version of you and me. Step into your power, take your space. You're enough, you're bold, you're full of grace.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 already. I can't believe it. It's just the time is going by so fast, and the feedback has been so amazing. And I'm really loving this new show, that being able to do this and share so much with you all here. So thank you for being here, whether you're live or whether you're watching in replay. And today I'm beginning a series. It's going to be a 4-part series. And the title is Vulnerability, Our Underrated Superpower. And part 1, this is called The Courage to Remain Open. So last week, if you remember, we explored why it's so hard to change. And I briefly mentioned vulnerability as one of the things that keeps us safe in the familiar of our life. And so today, in the next 4 episodes, I'm going to go deeper into it, like I promised in the last show. I said, okay, next week's going to be about vulnerability. And so this is what we're going to go into today. And what I'd like to introduce is a whole different way of understanding vulnerability. We tend to believe that vulnerability means weakness, exposure, putting ourselves in harm's way, or that, like a typical thing in relationships, particularly though vulnerability is not applying just to relationship, but one thing that is a very common comment that you might relate to is, I'm not opening again, it hurt too much, right? And so there's this idea that vulnerability has to do with another person or a situation, but it's really about being vulnerable and open in ourselves. That's the shift I'd like to invite. The moment that we become vulnerable in our own self with ourself, we let ourselves engage life, that's when we come alive. So for me, vulnerability is the foundational condition to feel fully alive, right? And I'm giving myself the gift of vulnerability. I'm not giving it to somebody else. I am creating the space that I'm open to encounter life differently. Life itself is movement, change, uncertainty, discovery, relationship, creation, destruction. All of this is a part of life, and we're never going to escape it. It's not going to change. Duality is a part of life as well. So wouldn't it be better to just find a way to navigate that we can keep our heart and soul intact while encountering the harshness sometimes of the world alongside the beauty of it? So we can't completely control what happens when we open. And that's what vulnerability is really about. It's our willingness to remain open enough to meet life as it actually arrives, as it actually is, versus with the filters of our conclusions that we have from past experiences or things we've seen or heard somewhere, right? So vulnerability exists in so many levels of our life, and it's almost an invisible incognito force that we don't realize is there. So I'm going to share some of the ways that vulnerability is in our life every single day. We encounter it, and sometimes we just move with it because we got to move, and other times we have resistance with it. So vulnerability is anytime we're starting something new, when we're going to be a beginner again, when we're making art and we're letting our creations be seen, or me being here on the podcast. This is the living example of vulnerability, putting oneself out in the world, right? Following a calling, even if the world is telling you no, right? Even if everybody in your family says, no, that doesn't make sense, but you have that calling, you're going to be vulnerable to let yourself explore it. Stepping into leadership, changing your mind, allowing yourself to have new thoughts, admitting you don't know, asking for help, saying I was wrong, apologizing, and also being open to receive a sincere apology and have your own inner dynamic change and open again because of the sincerity. Those are all moments of vulnerability. Setting a boundary as well, saying no, having the difficult conversation, loving someone, loving ourselves even, giving ourselves permission to be, right? To, even if it's against the grain, where, some of us might be an underdog. I know I was all my life. I was always a different thinker. I was always on a different path. And, life surely came my way and tried to steer me off it. But my heart and my soul just knew there's more. And so I stayed true. I entered the vulnerability of that. And I think that's a big part of what helped me get through, is I remained open for other possibilities. Even when I was broken, even when I was crushed, that's where I always went. And that's what I like to introduce as a possibility to you, to encounter challenge and loss and pain and all of these things with a little bit of a different angle of perception. Because when we just shift our perception 0.001 degrees, we end up somewhere completely different if we're in a boat, right? So my invitation today is take a deep breath. How is the fear of being vulnerable and open to something new limiting your capacity to live, to love, to create, to come fully alive in this life, alongside all the challenges and the pain and the things that are a part of life? Nobody is exempt of it. So take a deep breath with that. Another place vulnerability is affecting us too is, when we begin after disappointment, walking down into the unknown. So take a deep breath. And I'm just going to invite you to do a few of those breaths and really tune into a place in your life where you've created such a conclusion that there's nothing new is able to get in. And just sit with it. You don't have to change it. Just observe. Where do I limit the possibilities versus expand them? And of course, that's what this podcast is also about, expanding possibilities. And vulnerability is at the foundation of that. And if you think of all of these things that I just labeled and named, where vulnerability shows up in our life, there's a commonality there. And what it is they all require us to encounter something that we cannot completely predict or control. So certainty is one of our main survival needs. And one of the ways we attain that certainty is through, our prediction machine of our nervous system and our mind, of being able to say, well, I know this, so I don't need to think about it anymore. Or I've done that and I'm not doing that anymore. And through those limiting filters, we think we're predicting and controlling and safe in that predicting and controlling and certainty, but we're actually not. We're limiting our life. So real vulnerability is like being wide open and saying, okay, I don't know how someone will respond. We don't know whether the creation that we have in our mind and our vision will actually be able to flourish and come to life, right? We don't know what we'll discover about ourselves when we take that step, when we take that new job, when we do something that we've never done before. But that's exactly where the juice of life is. It's in that friction between the known, the unknown, and the known. Between, predicting and controlling and then letting go into life. Not recklessly, but being open to the possibility of something more than what we currently see or understand. So if I require total certainty before I participate, I can only keep choosing from what I already know. And so that's just going to keep me in the self-prophecy loop of reconfirming my experience and my observations again and again and again, right? So when I'm in that loop, then there's no new information, there's no discovery, there's no possibility, and there's no real change. And the thing is the majority of us, we want change, but we don't see how we're kind of getting in the way of that change by staying locked down in our perceptions and filters that were created from the past. Because as long as we're viewing through those filters, we're not really fully here in the moment. And if I'm not here fully in the moment, then I can't meet what is for what it is. And I can't meet myself for what's really inside of me. And if I can't do that, then it's like my own virtual reality. I'm just reliving my own story again and again and again. And I've been there. So I'm sharing everything that I share here because these are things that I witnessed and I encountered in myself and that I grew and I moved through. And I just want to share that it's possible to grow beyond the locked circuits. I call it closed circuit stories and closed circuit thinking, right? And there's an important distinction here. Vulnerability does not mean exposure, right? That's not what I'm talking about here. It isn't telling everybody everything. It's not just, here I am in the world. It isn't trusting everybody. It isn't abandoning boundaries. It isn't staying somewhere where it's harmful or where you're not happy. And it isn't reckless. That's not vulnerability. Sometimes vulnerability means opening, and sometimes it means saying no. Sometimes it means staying, and sometimes leaving. Sometimes speaking, sometimes listening. Sometimes admitting I simply don't know. And in that sense, vulnerability, in my interpretation, in my understanding, it's the openness with relationship to life with my whole self intact. So I am present through the whole thing. I'm not abandoning myself in my vulnerability. I am allowing myself to be open to something new that I don't yet know, that I don't yet see, and open to let new information come in and change me, to bring me closer to a direction of the wholeness and the happiness and the fulfillment that I'm actually longing for, right? So it's an openness to the truth of life while remaining in relationship with ourselves. That's how I understand vulnerability. So take a deep breath and just let that land. I'm going to repeat that again. It is the openness of truth and life while remaining in relationship with ourselves. And again, if you remember, the whole arc since the beginning of this series is relationship to self, relationship to life. In episode 1, I'm sharing how relationship is absolutely everything. And it's the disconnect from relationship with self, with others, with life, with the different aspects of life within us that creates the most friction and for the possibility of growth. But if we don't grow, then it creates the suffering. And it creates the endless cycles that, of waking up at 3 in the morning and worrying and crying and been there, done that, right? But we have to come to a point where if we want change, because nobody has to do anything, but if we're wanting change, then we need to come to a point where we're willing to lay down what we think we know and be vulnerable to invite something new in that can expand our awareness and our understanding towards greater wholeness and greater capacity to navigate the terrains of life, which are tough. It's not easy to be in this world. It's a world of beauty and it's a world of destruction and challenge. And like any warrior or adventurer or anything, we need to have the skills and the tool set to be able to navigate the various terrains in our life that are inevitable. Take a deep breath. And as I said in one of I think it was the first one, our biggest problem is we think we shouldn't have problems. We think we shouldn't have challenges that come up. And as uncomfortable as they are, but they also bring growth when we let them. So take a deep breath. And last week, I was talking about how the nervous system prefers familiarity. Familiarity gives us predictability. Vulnerability asks us to step beyond what we already know, though, not carelessly, but consciously. And that there's more to life than anything that we've ever experienced. It was last week I said, nobody on planet Earth knows everything there is to know. And that is a beautiful thing because then we're open. Then we know that I don't know everything there is to know. And if I know that my nervous system is a prediction machine, that I know that I'm quite often repeating the same 60,000 thoughts a day, every day. And if I'm doing that, then I'm hardwiring my nervous system. And my reticular activating system, that's the part of us that can identify the things we focus on more, then we're just strengthening that. And then we're just reaffirming our beliefs to ourselves again and again and again. And we wonder why we're unhappy. And we're wondering why, life seems so unfair. And yeah, there's challenges, but a big part of our predicament is that we're caught in these loops of thought and story they're just not serving our growth and our evolution. They're not serving the aliveness that we're here to live on Earth. So take a deep breath. There's always more to life than we've experienced, more that we don't know, more than what I haven't experienced, and more possibilities than we can imagine. One of my thoughts is like there's more possibilities than there are grains of sand on earth. It all depends on where we're directing our attention, what doors open for us or what doors stay closed. So how I meet this moment either opens my relationship with those possibilities or it closes it. It's as simple as that. So one of my key ways of navigating as I was working through reclaiming my nervous system from traumas that had locked me in my stories was I started observing what happens in my body. And I would notice that when I would get caught in story, I would contract, I would tighten, my gut would clench, my toes would grab the floor. And then I learned, okay, so I need to interrupt that pattern. And so expansion is where there's truth. Even if truth stings at first, it still brings expansion. So I learned to listen to my body, letting me know moment by moment by moment, where am I coming from? When I would contract and tightness, I would investigate. Where is this coming from? Is there really a danger or a threat here? Is this my story? And how can I open my story? Right? So we're building a relationship with possibilities, the possibilities to grow beyond where we are. And vulnerability is also refusing to make what I already know the boundary of what's possible. So I'm not making a conclusion. Sorry, I'm getting dry. I'm not going to live in a conclusion of my life. I'm going to live in the openness for what is waiting for me to discover within me. And just a few moments ago, I was talking about the closed circuit thinking. And this is what we all get caught in, to be predictable, to be certain, to stay safe. Something happens, we interpret it. We immediately qualify it. We immediately put a label and a story on it. And it's always going to be related to the past. And that's an important thing to realize. Every thought we have, it's related to something we've already experienced. It's not related to the unknown, right? And we interpret it. And then we conclude from that interpretation. I tried that, it didn't work. I was rejected, something's wrong with me. Being me is not safe. I failed, so I'm not capable. I trusted and I got hurt, trust isn't safe. This is just who I am. That's a comment that everybody says, and I used to say it too, but it's not, because you became who you are because of experiences of your past. And if who you are is creating an environment that makes you unhappy, then it's important to investigate that and see, well, okay, I'm not just who I am. I became who I am because of something. So let me get curious and find out what happened to me. Where did I lose a part of my spark? When did I stop trusting? When did I stop feeling fully alive? When did I stop singing, dancing, enjoying, celebrating life? Because we all did at one point. And like I said in another show, life happens and then we tend to close. But then we have these moments where our joy does arise, right? With dancing to our favorite song, being with our loved ones, things like that. That part of us is still alive in us, but it's just layered with all of these stories. And it doesn't diminish the impact of those stories, but to live a life fully alive, we can't live from story. We need to live in the moment. We need to have the vulnerability and willingness to feel the aliveness of the moment, not the certainty of our conclusions. Because as long as I'm living in the certainty of my conclusions, I'm not really living anymore. It's like a plant being tied off, and it doesn't receive all the nutrients from the earth anymore. It's still getting a little bit, but it's not getting the full flow, right? So take a deep breath with that. And see if any of those relate to you. Have you said those any time in your life? And you most likely have, because most of us have. And I'm going to invite you to suspend those beliefs just for a moment. Take a deep breath. Because our conclusion becomes our filter. And again, if we're looking through the filter of our conclusions, we're not seeing life. We're not seeing what truly is. We're not even seeing the person in front of us for who they truly are. We're seeing all the stories in between, like, here's my hand, these are my stories, and I'm only able to see these little parts really of the person. Otherwise, I'm just looking at my hand, I'm looking at my story. And that's not how we can, function and build a healthy life within our own self or with the world around us. So it's important to understand that once we've concluded that what something means, we stop observing what else may be true. And see where you can see that. Because you've concluded something, you don't ask any more questions about it. You just like, that's just that. And observation is also a frequency of aliveness, where we are present to, all that, the matrix energy, to tap in and tune in to what is actually present here in this moment. Because when we're in those conclusions, we're not present in the moment, and our vulnerability, when we let it come back online, it does something remarkable. It reopens the circuit. So then we're no longer looping. It creates a new pathway. And it's not about being naive. It's about curiosity. We do it curiously. And for me, one day when I was talking about this with someone, this beautiful metaphor came to me, and it's like vulnerability and curiosity. They're doing a swing dance together, right? That's the movement, right? They go hand in hand. It's the swing dance of our soul, is what I called it. When they're working together, there's aliveness, there's dynamism, right? And what's happening when there's when we're dancing with a partner is we're learning to listen to that invisible force that's creating the movement of togetherness. And I spent almost 11 years studying a form of dance, contact improv, with martial arts, Aikido, Tai Chi, and Feldenkrais, that was all about learning relationship through movement and dance to connect to that field where we meet. So it's no longer I and I, there's a meeting place. And we need to be vulnerable to be there. Because if I go into a dance and I'm thinking I know the steps and my partner's having another step, and then we're both sort of trying to teach each other our steps versus meeting how can our steps work together, then we're not going to meet, and it's going to be a struggling dance, right? So take a deep breath with that. So vulnerability says, I don't know what's happening next, but I'm willing to remain open. I'm willing to be fluid in my nature, to listen and adapt and move in accordance to what is moving in the field and in my body and in life in this moment authentically, not the movements of my stories that keep me stepping on my partner's toes, right? So curiosity answers the vulnerability with, I don't know, let's find out, right? And that's the dance, right? I don't know what's going to happen next is vulnerability. And then curiosity is, okay, I don't know either, but let's go find out. Let's meet the moment. That's one of my favorite statements that I use all the time is, let's meet the moment, right? And that is the dance. Vulnerability creates the opening, and curiosity creates the movement. And vulnerability loosens our grip on what we think we already know. And curiosity then is able to turn what we don't know and to ask, what else is there? What haven't I seen? What might life be showing me that I've got the blinders on to, that maybe I can remove those blinders and see a little bit more of what's in this room. What else could be possible? What other interpretations exist? What other meanings exist that can actually bring me through this experience with greater ease and grace rather than keep me stuck in it? And just like in the swing dancing, neither is in complete control of the dance. There's listening, there's responding, there's movement, there's surprise, and there's a bit of risk, always. But there's that expression I heard years ago, the universe always rewards the risk takers. And I was talking to this with my husband the other day, and reflecting on that statement a little bit more, I was thinking, yeah, that makes sense, because when we're in a closed circuit, there's no new life. But the moment we take a risk to stretch outside of the known, it creates an activation in the universe, call it the universal field. It creates a ripple, and that ripple brings something new back. And that's the reward. Because we've taken a new action, because we've embraced a new thought, because we've decided I'm not going to stay stuck with the way that I think things are, even if there might be some layers of truth to it, and there usually are. But we tend to only, see 1-2%, and then there's a whole 99-98% still remaining to be seen. And what we want is to have the ability to see as much of the whole picture as we can, because that's how we can come into coherency too. Because when we're narrowed, again, we're in the survival brain, we're in the limbic brain, and life doesn't happen there. Only protection happens there. Only shutting down happens there. The nervous system is not designed to help us fulfill our wildest dreams. It's there to keep us safe. We need our frontal cortex, and we need the vulnerability and curiosity in life to fulfill those dreams. And that means learning to understand our nervous system and how we can help it to navigate in these new territories through somatic work, breath work, all the different plethora of things that exist to help regulate our nervous system, like the heart math, which is one of the methods I teach, or the lomi lomi. There's so many beautiful ways that we can get support and then also learn ways to support ourselves to come back into movement and life, so that we can remain responsive to what's actually happening, rather than rigidly insisting that I know this next step, but we don't. I don't know what's going to happen. I can be in the exact same room with the exact same people, but at a different moment, there's going to be something different. There's different energies, right? And one of my favorite quotes from Gurdjieff, he was a mystic from Russia, I believe it was Russia. And I read this in my early 20s and it never left me. It said, he wrote, "Never assume that the person in front of you is the same person they were a year ago, a month ago, a week ago, a day ago, 5 minutes ago. And also never assume that of yourself." And when I read those words, I'm like, wow, that just that expanded me out of some closed circuits, right? Where I was limiting my own self. So take that in. Life is movement. The river is never the same 1 second to the next. A blade of grass is never the same 1 second to the next. Its basic structure is, but the movements within it are different and changing all the time. And so what Gurdjieff is basically talking about is vulnerability and being open to life, right? So vulnerability, also to understand a little bit, another layer is, without curiosity, vulnerability can leave us standing open and afraid, right? And then without curiosity, vulnerability can remain intellectual. We can see interesting ideas, but they will never really touch us or change us. So that's why the swing dance of the soul, vulnerability and curiosity, they go hand in hand. Together, they create movement. On their own, nothing moves. Or maybe fear might move more, right? Rather than creation. So vulnerability and curiosity actually allows life to reach us, to touch us, to move us, to change us, to direct us towards the fullness of the expression of who we are, beyond the things that have happened to us. And none of this is to negate trauma or bypass. But there comes a point where I know my story, I understand the dynamics, and I need to say, okay, now how do I evolve it into something that serves me? So I'm bringing the experience with me, but I'm alchemizing it. I'm transforming it into something useful and effective for my life, versus staying stuck in the nervous system lockdown of the pain and the trauma and the fear that situation impacted me with. Life is movement. We need to honor every movement. We need to honor the pain, but we're not supposed to pitch our tent and live there. Take a deep breath, because it's not a happy place to live. And if you look in nature, there's nothing in nature that does that. Everything, nature immediately starts to grow after a moment of destruction. There's no waiting. Take a deep breath. Vulnerability opens the door to the unknown. Curiosity takes its hand and just says, okay, let's play, let's dance. And that's the playfulness of life. I read a really beautiful quote this week, and it said, don't just heal to heal your trauma to that level, to just be healed, like to heal the story. heal so that you come back into playing with life again. I'm paraphrasing it. And I went, that is so beautiful, right? So we're wanting to, what is the goal of healing? We want to be back in our playful nature. We want to create. We want to have joy. We want to love. And all of that requires vulnerability. So that's why I say vulnerability is our superpower that we don't realize, because it's gotten such a bad rap of like, it's scary, it's terrifying. I don't want to trust, I don't want to do that. And we're just protection, but that's not where life is. We need to be, not going crazy with risk taking in the sense of recklessly, but to develop a healthy discernment and understanding that there are moments where life is inviting us to be vulnerable and curious, because there's something great on the other side of it, waiting for us to know ourselves and to learn. So vulnerability says, I don't know what happens next, but I'm willing to be open. So take a deep breath. Curiosity says, let's see. And see how that lands with you. You might have some resistance to that. Yeah, but. And I invite you, okay, be with the yeah, but, and be curious about the yeah, but. I'm not trying to tell you to change everything about you, but just to be curious, to inquire. What else is there? Right? So vulnerability helps us loosen our grip on certainty. It allows us to be comfortable in not knowing, and a willing and eager student to learn and know. It lets new information enter. It makes room for surprise. And curiosity creates the movement. It asks, what else is there? What haven't I seen? What else could this teach me? What else might be possible here? Let's meet the moment. Let's see. So think about the swing dance. Where can you come into dance with life again through curiosity and vulnerability? And I wanted to share a story. For me, one of my vulnerable experiences of learning to understand vulnerability differently is when I was learning the traditional Hawaiian healing with my kahuna elder in Hawaii. And I'd already been practicing massage and healing for, I guess it had already been like 15 years. And I always felt haunted that every time I entered the studio, I would feel a certain kind of uncertainty. Like, I don't know anything. What am I doing? Who do I think I am? Even though I've had nothing but amazing results, amazing feedback, and the proof in the pudding is there that the work I do is effective and it really helps people. But I still had this uneasiness at the beginning of every single session. I'd go in feeling like I don't know anything. So one day in circle, talking with my elder, and we're 9 students, I chose to be vulnerable to ask that question too, which was also vulnerability. And I put up my hand and said, I got this thing, I feel like I don't know anything whenever I enter a session. Like I don't have confidence or something. And I was expecting to be mentored on confidence and self-esteem and all of this stuff. And I felt like there was something wrong with me that I had that. And then he was silent for a moment and he said, perfect. And I'm like, perfect? What do you mean perfect? He says, because that's the state of aliveness. That's the state of being present to meet your client as they are, not with an agenda, not with a predetermined idea or story of what you're going to do or what they've got or whatever. You're meeting them in the raw moment of what is real and true in that moment. He says, and that is the space we need to be in to be able to do the healing work, to be able to create the space for life to work through us. And I was like, whoa, that floored me, because I did not expect that. I expected, to be mentored on, well, you need to be more confident. You've got so many years, you should, which is a Western mindset, right? And he's like, no, this is perfect. And then, so since then, I still go in with that not knowing. But now I'm aware that not knowing is beautiful, because it's creating the space for me to meet each client that comes uniquely. And I often just sit down with them and say, hey, I have no idea what we're going to do. I have no idea where this conversation is going to go when I'm doing the coaching, but I do know I have a lot of resources and insights that will just naturally be activated through the course of our conversation and work together. And then magic happens, right? So vulnerability serves me in that way, and it served me in so many other ways. So take a deep breath with that. And what does that activate in you is a reflection of where you might be having self-doubt somewhere, even about your own gifts or your capacity. And maybe it's not about a lack of confidence at all. Maybe it's just, the state you need to be in order to really show up fully for whatever it is you're doing, to show up fully for your dreams, to show up fully for the work you're doing, to show up fully for your partner, to show up fully for your child, so that life can guide you and teach you, your soul can guide and teach you moment by moment by moment. Because we don't have to know every step in order to remain in the dance of life. We just need to know ourselves better, right? And then when we know ourselves better, we start to learn the next steps of the dance even better, and we become a master at the dance. And that's basically, just thinking of it now, that's basically what my passion is to help people master the dance of their life. That's just coming to me right now. It's like, I really love that, and when I used to do the contact improv, right, improvisation, and I had this insight one day after doing the martial dance for like 3 hours or something like that, and I was all glowing red like a tomato because it was the most amazing dancing I'd ever experienced. And then I was sitting on the subway and like, wow, life is an improvisation. Not just going into the studio and doing the improvising dance. Life itself is an improvisation where we're constantly meeting the new moments and choosing new thoughts and choosing, where am I going to go with this? And each thought leads down a path. And then it's like, okay, well, if I'm in the driving seat of my thinking, that means I can influence a new path. And I can choose. And if I'm finding the dance that I'm dancing in my life right now is not flowing, and it's not making me feel ecstatic and happy and joyful, and again, there's going to be problems and pain. That's a part of life. But doesn't mean we can't still have ecstasy, joy, passion, love in our everyday moments. If we live like life is an improv, that's what makes that probable and possible. So take a deep breath with that. And where is it that you might be holding yourself back with an idea that, your doubt is wrong? Maybe it's just an invitation to be open to something new, right? To begin to be open without imposing yesterday's answer on today's experience or yesterday's interpretation on this moment. So you can be available, you can be listening, you can be present, and you can be receptive to your own soul and to the moment that you're living in this moment. And then you can actually meet what's there. And then realize that it's never been a lack of mastery. It's just a part of the mastery process, and it's a part of the mystery. We've sort of erased the welcoming of the mystery. We want to know everything. And it's not possible. We won't know everything. To be vulnerable in those moments, to say, I don't know everything there is to know about why this situation happened, or why I'm seeing this happening in the world. I don't know all the details because I'm not God. I'm not the one that can see everything at all times. But I can see patterns, and I can be open to learn more. And the more that I'm open to learn more, then a lot of the conflict that we have in ourselves and with other people, it softens. And then there's movement. The dance can start to move in us again. So take a deep breath. And another key thought I wanted to deliver here today is understanding that wisdom requires vulnerability. We think wisdom is just the mind, and knowing, and that creates security. But wisdom requires vulnerability, because wisdom begins with the willingness to discover that there's more to know than what we presently know. We can't learn while we're defending every conclusion or our story. We cannot create while demanding certainty before beginning. We cannot truly meet another person if we've already decided who they are. And this happens in a lot of relationships. You know, contempt builds because we think we know the other person. And so then we label the person with the key traits that we think they are that we dislike. And then we stop seeing the things that we like, and we stop seeing the whole person. And this is a key downfall for most relationships. We just stop seeing rightly. We focus too much on the things that separate. And next week is going to go more into relationship. And sometimes we do that as a preemptive strike to not have to feel vulnerable and feel rejected. So we're going to go into that next week. It's quite an interesting dance and dynamic that we have there. So be spacious in your thinking, be spacious in your heart, be spacious in your mind, right? And this week, I'm going to invite you as the SoulSpectives of the week is to notice where certainty may have closed a door, the idea of certainty. It could be something about yourself. It could be another person, a relationship, an opportunity, a dream, a possibility, or just life itself, or something you've tried before, but it didn't work the first time. But maybe there is another time. Maybe it didn't work that time because there was something to learn through the failing of it so that you can succeed at it. So rather than resting with the failure, it didn't work, say, well, how can I make it work? What might there be for me to be able to make this a reality? So it's not about forcing yourself to change your conclusions, and not to tell yourself you're wrong. It's not about manufacturing positivity. It's simply becoming present. Present enough that you can become vulnerable enough to reopen the circuit where it shut down prematurely, where it closed off possibilities. And just ask yourself, what else might be true here? What haven't I seen? What is there yet to be seen? What might become possible if I allow myself to step out of what I think I know, to learn more? And then let's see. Let's just be observers and participants, full participants in the aliveness of life. Meet the moments and let your life answer. So take a deep breath with that. That's my invitation to reflect on that this week. And I thank you again. We're coming to a close for this one. And I'm so grateful for you spending your time with me. And next week, we're going to continue about the vulnerability with relationships and where, going deeper into what allows us to remain open even when something has hurt us, even when we feel heartbroken, how we can shift that into a momentum of knowing self and loving self and being actually more open to life rather than shutting down to life. And why self-trust changes our entire relationship to vulnerability. Okay, so thank you so much. And again, as always, please stay curious, stay compassionate, and above all, stay in connection and loving relationship with yourself. And thank you. Bye. Bless your week.
Step into your power, feel it rise. No more hiding, no more compromise. You're the light, you're the spark, burning bright. This is your moment.